Welcome to the Coach's Hot Seat podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Coach's Hot Seat podcast with Mark Haines, commissioner and publisher of Coach's Hot Seat, the platform that tracks every FBS coach in America by performance, pressure, and contract reality. Some coaching hires are built on track record, while others are built almost entirely on projection. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today we're talking about the hires that carry the most risk before the first game is even played. So let's get into it. Mark, how are you?
Great to see you, Sean.
It's good to see you too. A lot of talk about records versus what I call the crystal balling or the magic 8 ball of coaching and hiring. What makes a coaching hire feel risky from the moment it's announced?
Well, the instant tell when the announcement is made, if it needs an explanation, then you might be risky. So if the AD is spending the press conference convincing people why this is a good hire instead of letting the resume speak for itself, then you've got a problem. Good hires sell themselves. The fan base sees the name and immediately gets it.
Yeah.
Risky hires require a pitch. Trust the process. He's a rising star. We see something others don't, and that language is a flashing red light.
Yeah, interesting. If the announcement provokes a ton of questions, and because like you were saying earlier, everybody's got access to a lot of information. So unless there's some secret stuff behind the scene, because that, and then how transparent can the organization be? It's like, yeah, all that's true, but there's things you don't know happening here, and that's why we hired him. And I can't say it out loud at a press conference, But interesting stuff. How do you evaluate a candidate whose appeal is mostly based on potential rather than actual results?
Well, very carefully. Potential is probably the most expensive word in college football. When somebody tells me a candidate has tremendous upside, what I hear is we don't have enough evidence yet.
Yeah.
So I start asking specific questions. Potential to do what exactly? Based on what evidence? If the answer is scheme, innovation, show me the numbers, yards, points, efficiency, not the highlights. If the answer is recruiting, show me the classes he's personally built, not the ones he contributed a couple of guys to while writing somebody else's brand. Mm-hmm. Potential without specifics is just a story, and stories don't win football games.
Got it. What concerns come up when a program hires someone with limited or no coaching experience?
Well, there's always the unknown unknowns. A first-time head coach doesn't know what he doesn't know yet. And in today's environment, that learning curve can bury you. The job has expanded so far beyond X's and O's that it's almost unrecognizable from what it was even 5 years ago.
Wow.
You're running a multi-million-dollar operation with NIL, portal, name, image, and likeness collectives, donor management, media obligations, and a roster that can walk out the door any Tuesday in December. My concern with an inexperienced hire isn't whether he can coach football. He probably can. It's whether he can manage everything else that comes with the title and still coach football. That's the part nobody knows until he's in the chair, and by then the program's already committed.
Man, and just the speed and the most recent, like you said, within this past 5 years, the amount of the amount that the job description has changed, right? I mean, there's how many, there is one of those things where how many people could have all the experience at this point? It's going to be a whole lot of people that are sinking or swimming over the next couple of years. And that sort of expertise remains to be built in a lot of places.
We saw an inordinate number of coaching changes this year, and I think that's going to be more the norm than the exception.
Okay.
Going forward.
So let's talk about a coordinator. How much does coordinator success actually translate when someone takes over an entire program? And I know we touched on this in an earlier conversation, but people may not have heard it.
Yeah, coordinator success matters less than people think. And I say that without any disrespect to coordinators. Mm-hmm. Being a great coordinator means you're elite at one dimension of the game. And being a head coach means you're competent across every dimension and elite at managing people who handle each one. So those are fundamentally different skill sets. So we've watched coordinator after coordinator put up historic numbers on one side of the ball and then take a head coaching job and completely drown in the operational side. The guys who really translate successfully are almost always the ones who've already made functioning as an associate head coaches in everything but title. They've been involved in recruiting strategy, staff management, budget decisions, donor interaction. And if a coordinator's entire world has been the play sheet and the position room, then the jump to the head coach isn't a promotion. It's a complete career change for them.
Wow. In light of that, and then also just the rapid change of the job description, the responsibilities, and the skills that you need to be successful, you know, I wonder, and this is another podcast probably, but it's like, is the way in which organizations build their not their roster, but the infrastructure, the hierarchy, the job titles, that used to define how football gets produced and executed. It's not the same game, but a lot of the current thinking is legacy thinking, which is true in any business, and certainly in sport.
Yeah, there's been a radical change in the last few years. But we didn't see general managers, or if we did have somebody had the general manager title, they were the person who handled logistics, like hotel,
Yeah,
bus to the airport,
yeah,
airplane.
travel.
It wasn't general manager like we're seeing now. And even the title general manager varies greatly from school to school and from conference to conference. So I think we're continuing to watch this evolve. It's going to continue to evolve for the next few years, and we'll see where it ends up.
Yeah, that's interesting. Even as you're saying, of course, as we record this, we're in the midst of, the Stanley Cup NHL playoffs about to kick off here. Baseball season's going. Thinking about the different job titles that exist in some of these other, professional sports, and the manager of a baseball team is a very different. It's a bigger job than the title seems to imply in terms of how manager is typically used in the world. So
Yep.
it's interesting stuff. Where do you draw the line between a calculated gamble and a hire that feels too speculative?
Well, a calculated gamble is a thesis that you can defend with evidence. You're taking a risk, but you can articulate exactly why this specific risk makes sense for the specific program at this specific time. A speculative hire is one with the thesis that's basically, well, what if this works out? And that's not really a strategy. That's a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
So the line for me is whether the AD can answer three questions. One, what specific problem does this coach solve? Two, what evidence from his career supports the belief that he can solve it? And three, what's the realistic timeline for knowing whether it's working? If the AD can answer all three with specific, it's a calculated gamble. If the answers are vague and they're hypothetical, it's speculation. And programs that speculate with the head coaching position usually end up back in the market in 3 years, starting over with less money and less patience from the fan base.
Yeah, and potentially less interest from potential coaches, given the way things got handled. You mentioned that third question in terms of timelines. How do expectations change when a school hires someone who is viewed as a long-term project?
Well, I think we watched it play out right down the street. I'm in Pasadena, right down the street at the Rose Bowl. Deshaun Foster was hired by Martin Jarman as the head coach at UCLA. He had no coordinator experience. He had no head coaching experience. He obviously wasn't the associate head coach for Chip Kelly, and he was just thrown to the wolves. Martin Jarman should have been fired for that. He gave him no support. It really set him up to fail. So, here's a guy who is a UCLA diehard. I mean, a real asset to that program. And they put him in a position where he was not going to win. And, the fan base just, really started to get angry. They were arguing with Martin Jarman, the athletic director, in the Rose Bowl at games. And you could just see Deshaun Foster just fall apart. You got very dejected, very angry, very sad looking. It was really sad to watch.
Yeah.
really sad. If you're a coach and you're taking a project job, the best thing to do is get the commitment in writing and in the buyout, because the verbal promises from an AD have a very short shelf life. You want to know what support you're going to get.
Yeah.
You want to know that you're going to get the backup that you need. You're going to need to know that you're going to be prepared. They're going to help you prep. So you don't walk out into a press conference and say, I'm from UCLA, USC is the other school in LA, and here we are. We all saw that press conference, and that just said to me he didn't have any support.
That was brutal. We were talking about earlier the skill set of recruiting, and I'm curious, what role does recruiting reputation play in justifying what might be a high risk hire?
Well, recruiting reputation is probably the number one thing that programs get to overlook in a resume, and I understand why. In a sport where talent is the single most predictor of wins, a coach can recruit at an elite level and has a tangible, measurable advantage. But here's the catch. Recruiting reputation is often inflated by proximity. A coordinator at a blue blood is going to sign top 100 players because the brand does most of the selling. The question is whether that a coordinator can recruit at the same level when he doesn't have the Alabama or Georgia logo on his shirt. That's a very different ask. So when a program justifies a risky hire by saying he's an elite recruiter, I want to know elite compared to what? At what program? With what resources? If the answer is he recruited well at a comparable program with comparable resources, that's meaningful. If the answer is he recruited well at a program where everybody recruits well, then you're not getting much information.
Yeah, where you don't even have to quote unquote recruit,
Right.
They're coming to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, big difference. What has to go right for a high upside hire to actually succeed, do you think?
Well, almost everything, and that's what makes them high risk. You need to have staff hires to land. You need the portal to break your way in year one because you don't have time to develop a roster from scratch anymore. You need the NIL infrastructure to hold while the first-time head coach figures out how to manage relationships he's never had to manage before. And you need the AD to actually provide the air cover he promised and not panic after a 4-8 first-year start. And you need the coach himself to grow into the job faster than the pressure grows around him. That's a lot of things that have to go right all at once, and it's not impossible. It has worked, but anybody who tells you a high upside hire is a smart gamble needs to acknowledge the margin for error is essentially zero, and that most programs don't have the institutional patience or financial flexibility to absorb it if things go sideways early. When Cignetti was hired at Indiana, their first game was here at UCLA at the Rose Bowl, and I talked to a lot of the Indiana fans who said, yeah, we don't know about this guy. And, he has sort of a gruff personality, and that had come out. And so they were really, they weren't sure about him. I think he's proven himself, obviously. But that was the initial take was, well, I don't know about this guy. Yeah. He's kind of gruff.
Yeah, right. Yeah, speaking of, the personalities and dispositions and the culture of the school and the city, the state, it all comes. It's an interesting dynamics at play. As we come up on our time here, I'm curious because I know obviously you're the expert. You have been following and studying all this. When you look at hires that have struggled, what are the patterns that tend to show up in those decisions?
Well, there's three that show up over and over again. First, the hire is usually speculative. It's usually reactive, and they're doing it kind of by the seat of their pants. The program probably got dumped by its first choice and maybe its second choice, and then scrambled to find somebody rather than resetting the search. Panic hires almost always fail because the process was about filling a vacancy, not solving a problem. And, the AD prioritized the narrative over infrastructure. He hired a guy who made the best impression in the interview instead of the guy whose actual skill set matched what the program's actual needs are. Interviews are performances, but I want to see the body of work. And third, this is the big one. The program didn't honestly assess its own situation before making the hire. if you don't know what you are as a program, you can't possibly know what kind of coach you need. Schools that skip that kind of self-assessment are the ones who end up hiring for the program they wish they were instead of the one they actually are. That mismatch is the single biggest reason coaching hires fail.
Yeah, that an institutional reality check, which is hard to muster. There's not a mirror big enough for all those different political factions to look into at the same time and come to a consensus about what the hell are we and what do we need, honestly.
And some of the big name programs, the blue bloods, the ones that have year in and year out have been successful. They're used to, our program is known for X, and they firmly believe that, and it is like hitting them right in the nose if they're not that, right? They're not. They may know it deep down, but it might take a little bit of time for them to accept it.
Yeah, a lot of nostalgia.
Yeah.
Times, we're out of time as I lose my voice, so that's perfect timing. Mark, good to see you as always.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate your time today.
You bet. That's it for today's episode of the Coach's Hot Seat podcast. You can find the latest rankings and analysis at coacheshotseat.com. Thanks for listening. I'm Sean O'Connor. Be sure to leave a review, subscribe, share this with another college football fan. They will be much appreciated. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.